Hello and welcome to another great edition of Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. We talk about all things faith, finance, your calling in any number of areas of ministry, profession, business, and this idea of living an abundant life, connecting it all to doing what God called us, purposed us to do. And so, we love this show because we have all kinds of amazing guests, and today is no exception. But before we bring our guest in, I want you to focus on a particular scripture. Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. So as you know, that's Proverbs 15:22. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of being able to assess the value of professional financial advice. Those of you who know me in my day job as an editor at Black Enterprise know that this conversation is near and dear to my heart. But it's also key to your ability to maximize your capacity to create wealth, to be able to tap into the wisdom and expertise of others. Listen, this is going to be a great show. You're going to get a lot out of it, and hopefully you'll be able to do a lot with it. This is Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. Welcome to Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm your host, Alfred Edmond Jr. And once again, we have a powerful guest with a great conversation and a lot of wisdom to share about how you can advance, leverage your faith, leverage your knowledge of God's word so that you can live and fulfill his promise of abundant life. Now, we all know as listeners of this show that when God talks about living an abundant life, we are not just talking about finances and profits. So we always want to make it very, very clear. Abundance goes far beyond mere money, mere finances. But to the degree that you are successful financially, just like in other areas of abundant life, you want to be able to tap into expertise beyond your own. Here's one of the challenges, especially in the financial services industry, and especially for many people of color and certainly Black Americans. We often don't know who we should talk to, how to assess financial advice, and as someone who interviews many professionals in the financial education and financial services industry, there's this thing called the trust barrier that must be cleared in order to really take advantage, to find the right advisors, to trust them, so that you actually take the actions necessary to get the results that you want. Well, our guest today, is just the perfect person to have this conversation. Please welcome to the show, Michelle Richburg, President and CEO of Richburg Enterprises.
Hi, how are you?
I am so happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm glad to be here. This is so exciting. Thank you for having me.
Well, the reason I'm excited, again, my day job, if you will, is a editor and leader and executive at Black Enterprise. But one of the biggest missions of my work that was charged to me when I got hired was that in order for our audience of African Americans to really kind of get their arms around wealth creation, and now I joined Black Enterprise in the late 80s, that yes, we had to educate them, we had to give them information and access to resources, but the other element was getting them to understand, one, they needed financial expertise to help them, financial professionals, and two, to identify, to get past the trust barrier that many African Americans had with the financial services industry. So one of the biggest charges that we had back in those days was to develop the Michelle Richburgs of the world, because they didn't exist in large numbers. And we have to help support those that do exist and encourage others to go into this profession so that there will be now we have, I would say, a critical mass at least of Black financial professionals who could get past not the education barrier, but the trust barrier. So with that in mind, to set up my personal passion of having you on the show, talk to me about your journey from to where you are, from where you started from. I don't know if you started out when you were 8 years old saying, what I want to be is a financial management and a financial coach. Talk about your journey to becoming who you are, and why this work is important to you.
Well, that's a loaded question, but I have all the answers. First, I would start by answering the question, and I don't know if I've answered it like this before publicly, but it was God's design, right? I was raised by my grandparents, and they were domestic workers. And my grandmother had been talking to me about money since the time I could remember. Let's say, whether it was allowance, and then beyond that, because as a domestic worker, she used to, well, now they say chef and driver, but she was the cook and my grandfather was the chauffeur. So they would have to, she would prepare the meals and do all that stuff. So the family that she worked for, they used to have elaborate dinner parties and things. And so as we know, other communities outside of ours, most part, they talk about finance, they talk about entrepreneurship, they talk about building legacies and all that. So my grandmother, if you will, she was ear hustling, right? And she was listening to the conversations, and she had a very good relationship with her boss. So when they would go to the bank, she would bring my grandmother with her. And so she brought my grandmother into the bank, helped her introduce her to banking and CDs and all of that other kind of stuff. And that was her introduction to building wealth. And she passed that on to me. So it wasn't an accident that I started working in a bank when I was in high school. That's where it started. And it's a 40-year journey to where we are right now. I started as a check processor and made my way up to senior vice president for a private bank, managing finances for mostly folks in the entertainment, urban hip hop world, until I was fired, right?
Right.
And which led to Richburg Enterprises, which is another story, but it was God's protection and his direction for where I'm sitting now. But that's a condensed version of how I started and worked my way up through the banking industry. I've worked for Chase, for Citibank, for all of the majors, and in the retail bank, and have learned every function in the bank.
So your career during that segment of your career correlates very closely to my career at Black Enterprise, because I'm pushing up on my 38th anniversary of the company. So roughly, it's very strong overlap. And so what I observed and what we were told as financial journalists at Black Enterprise about the evolution of African Americans in your profession, what we saw from the outside, you lived from the inside in terms of, talk to me. And I know you said that you just told part of the story in terms of your pre-entrepreneurial pursuits before you started your own company. Talk to me about, okay, you leave corporate America and you start Richburg Enterprises. Talk to me about that evolution to where you are now as an entrepreneurial expert in the financial services industry.
Well, so when I was fired 13 years ago, I'm sure I usually say, have you had a bad day, like a pink slip bad day? Because I went to work like I normally would do. And this particular day, I had a meeting with a sports manager to talk about banking his athletes when I got called into my boss's office for a meeting. And at that level, I reported directly to the president and CEO of the bank, right? And so I tried to tell him I had something else to do and I would meet tomorrow, but they pushed for me to come in. So at the end of the day, it was my boss. I went to the meeting, asked to change from lunch meeting to dinner meeting with this sports agent. And listen, by 2:00 that afternoon, I was on Fifth Avenue fired, okay, with my head spinning. Wow. So it was a long road to finding my purpose. And I didn't even call it that back then because it came out of the clear blue sky, and I was really on top of the world, if you will, in terms of my career and the clients that I was working with. So I went through all the things, right? Of trying to navigate what was next, because what I know now, but what I didn't know then, is I attached my identity and my purpose to the institution that I work for, not to the gift that I provided, that I was the gift, not the bank. So that led me, after meeting with my mentor, praying. My pastor would come every Wednesday. He's up in Syracuse, he's a friend, and he would come and we would have lunch every Wednesday and talk to me and just encourage me. And after 9 long months, I got the confidence to circle the block with 2 clients that I worked for, and two clients that I did more than just their banking. Like, they would call me for whatever they needed, and presented the opportunity to be their business manager. And that's really how it started. We have a joke now where we say client 001. Still with me now, but I started with 2 clients in 2015. We're soon to be 10 years old in September.
Wow, and I love that. It's going to be perfect segue into what I want to talk about when we come back for our next segment, how faith was your anchor, and you don't know you need an anchor until the storm hits. Like, you have an anchor, you're like, oh, everything's cool. What's the anchor for? Till a storm hits. So listen, everybody, we're here with Michelle Richburg of Richburg Enterprises. This is Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. We're talking about how you assess the value of professional financial advice and all other things faith and finance. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., your host, and we are here with Michelle Richburg, President and CEO of Richburg Enterprises, who's already blessed me with this whole, listen, people think of faith and it's like, oh, it's so wonderful, then the Lord is good and God is good all the time. But usually faith is activated in times of trouble, in times of storm. Like, how do you know if you really trust God if you don't have any opportunities to trust God? So, as you jump into that, now you had this career, you thought you were on track, you were ready to meet with a client on behalf of the institution that was paying you, and then they say, thank you, but no thank you, we don't need you anymore. Talk to me about how faith was your anchor as you transitioned to being your own boss, if you will, and building your own practice.
Well, if I'm completely transparent, it was a journey. Right? So I was brought up in the church. I raised my son in the church. I went away from the church, as we do as a young folk. You think you know it all. And then I made my way back, and my faith was strong. But when this happened, it really hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And I just, you question God, which they say you're not supposed to question God. But I was a single mother. I, live in New York. It's very expensive. And I just, I was confused about how this happened to me, especially when I was excelling at my job and I had creme de la creme, A-list celebrities as clients, and the bank was making a lot of money. But through the process, and I met with my mentor, who talked me through and reminded me about who I was and kind of helped me with my confidence back. And that's why I said with client 001 and the other client, she said to me, Michelle, you know everybody, you did everything for this one, everything for that one. Talk to these people, see if you could be of service to them. Even though I worked with business managers the entire time, I didn't just automatically think I would be a business manager. And where my pastor came in at, he really made me dig deep with my faith. He really assured me that God had my best interest at heart. He really assured me that that wasn't the end, right? And so that is what gave me my initial confidence, I guess, to call those people and start. And then I would say it also, which I talk about now currently, and the things that I talk about, but it was a mindset shift, right? Mm-hmm. So I did take another job at another bank. I after the fact, and I worked there for 3 years because I was so conditioned to working for a bank and to getting a paycheck and having health insurance until I went to see Oprah. I went to see Oprah in 2014 for her limited tour of Live Your Best Life Now. And it was during those 3 days that I realized that I was holding on to things that no longer served me, that was not working. And that next bank at that job was one of those things. So I took a leap. I bet on myself. I quit my job in 2015. I spent the summer reaching out to the basket of clients, more than just the two that I started as the side hustle, and asked them for a meeting and told them what I was venturing to do. And every single client except one said, let's go. What we doing? What's next? And the one client actually that didn't come was because her husband managed her fund. She had a business manager. So in September 2015, the office of Richburg Enterprises opened. I had my one-woman show. My name was on the door, and I went to work. And I will say that in the beginning, it was very stressful because I felt like I had to prove myself all over again. And I also will say, I could say this publicly, Wendy Williams was one of my first clients. And this is when she transitioned from radio to television. So music entertainment is very different than TV. So I had to learn the different nuances and all of the administration regarding television, right? The money part was easy, but it was the other skill sets that I had to teach myself. And that's how we started. And then, we're here now, thriving and just trying to help the folks build wealth. And I'm also, it's building a business too. It's more about legacy. So it's all of the infrastructure and the different things that as an entrepreneur and not a solopreneur, like we are a firm with people, that you still have challenges, right? But what I know now is that leads me to, I co-authored this book, Chasing 100, right? So you'll find that if you don't pay attention, you're kind of just coasting at what my coach would say, 75. Because you're comfortable. But in order to go to the next level in chasing 100, expect to be tested. Expect to overcome hard things because entrepreneurship is not easy. And working with people and their money and the trust factor, as you started us off, is certainly not easy.
Michelle, you hit on a couple of points that I always try to emphasize on this show. One, because it speaks to my own personal experience. I tell people most of the time when we don't get great, it's not because we're dealing with bad. It's usually because we're dealing with good enough. So like you said, you got that bank job for 3 years because while it was safer, it was good enough. And you had to have courage to, like you said, bet on yourself, step out on faith and say, yeah, this is good enough, but this other thing is what I really probably should be doing. And then as an entrepreneur, you talk about 75. Again, in most places, 75 is literally good enough. That's good enough for a C minus. It's good enough. And I always tell people, oftentimes when you see people are trapped in their call or trapped and not in their calling, it's not because they're somewhere doing something totally horrible or totally without value, but it's not what they're being called to do, but good enough keeps them from, like you say, going from 75 to 100. And to hear you to hear you say that from your perspective, through your lens of deciding to let go of the perceived security of a paycheck to build your own company and like you said, own your talent, own your gifts, own your expertise for yourself, because you're selling the same thing in your company that you were selling when you were working for someone else. It was about betting on yourself. But there's other things that even as an entrepreneur, it could be very easy to say, okay, well, we made payroll this month. Let's not rock the boat. Let's not reach out. And most companies that I've seen fail over the years, they fail because of that mindset. They missed the turn. They missed the opportunity. There's a downturn in the economy, and because they've been running at 75, when it's time to run at 100, they can't do it. Like, no, 75 is what I do. I can't get up to 100, not on short notice. So,
Right.
but if you're already at 100, and then the economy calls for 75, you can say I can do 75 because I do 100 all the time. So I just think that's very important, not just for your industry, but for just how we approach life. And faith is the thing that gets us from being happy at 75 and reaching for 100, or being happy at my job but reaching for that business that I never had before. Listen, you can tell I'm excited. This happens every show. This is Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. We're here with Michelle Richburg of Richburg Enterprises, and we will be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. And we are here with Michelle Richburg, President and CEO of Richburg Enterprises. And we are talking about the value of financial advice, the importance of getting business financial advice, coaching to help you achieve your goals. Listen, we all have our own storehouse of intellectual capital, but too often we try to only rely on that to navigate when there are people who are trained experts to help us to tap into their intellectual capital to help us to make better decisions, in this case, in terms of our finances. Michelle, what I want you to kind of address is this idea that you had to earn the trust of your clients. And our audience, as they're looking for financial advisors and financial advice, often the barrier is, I don't know who to trust. I don't know, what should I be looking for? What should they know? What shouldn't they know? And you and I know, I'll be the one to say it, so you don't have to. There are a lot of people who run around as financial advisors, financial coaches, who don't, like, it's not illegal to decide you want to be one and just go and, manage people's money. And you can look at any episode of American Greed and see, wow, they really believe that. They really gave them their life savings. So, and for Black people in particular, because we've had a historic distrust of financial institutions in general for a lot of good reasons, it's really only been in the last 40 years, even during the course of our respective careers, that we now have a critical mass of people in the industry, that the industry itself is more sensitive to diverse markets and Black consumers. And we have people like you who can speak the language and understand the culture of the people you're serving. With all of that said, with that whole big setup, what do you offer your clients, potential clients, that makes them not only trust in your expertise, but trust in you? And what should our audience be thinking about when they're saying, okay, I've done as much as I can on my own, but I really need to get some help. I need some professional help in saving money, balancing my budget, building wealth, et cetera. What are the things that they should look for to really identify the best and most trustworthy people in the space?
Well, I mean, I can answer the question easily, but I pause to take a deep breath, because you're 100% correct, right? So I always joke, even with my partner now, and it's even true right now, that the clients that I had in corporate when I was in banking, and even now, I have relationships with their parents, mostly the moms, right? And when I took a step back to really analyze that, I was like, wow, that's, I'm like part of the family kind of thing. And it's not that I set out to do that, and I love it. Actually, I don't mind it, but I think it's just in my bones or whatever, because we are dealing with people's money, right? And even when I was in the bank and, I was tunnel vision, I just needed bank account, we had goals, and why they should bank with me versus someone else. And it was because of my industry. I'm in the music industry. I mean, we work with, entrepreneurs, obviously not in the music industry, but it was about a relationship, right? And it was about that I understand the culture, but I also understand us as a people. And then if I go back to my childhood and my grandparents, if I go back to as I elevated in the financial institutions, it was very apparent that we weren't offered or knew about the same things that, say, other clients did, especially when I made it to private banking and I was a group director. So it's on in me to provide the financial expertise and all of my knowledge to help you get to your next level, right? And so in that, it's a lot of conversations. It's just a relationship. And then from the relationship would be like, oh, I want to buy a house. Oh, I need to, start my retirement, whatever it may be. Now we cultivate that in the business management realm. But in terms of just building a relationship with folks, and whether I was their banker or now I'm the business manager, it's that we are able to assess and work with them to, accomplish their goals. So I think the long answer to your question is I identify with our clients. I was that person, as a single mother, as trying to put my son through school. And so it's easy for me to share my experiences when I'm helping the client try to meet their financial goals and create wealth, and really talk to them and help them structure a blueprint, because there is a blueprint to creating wealth, right? And I've realized that it's my purpose too. That's another thing we didn't talk, like I'm very intentional about it. And so I take the time to have the conversations and to educate, and really too, which I say a lot because it's one of our core values, is we do the work and we are in the weeds. That's what our clients pay us for. But while we're doing that, I am teaching them and letting them know the why behind the certain things that we're doing and why it's important.
Michelle, and again, I talk to people in your industry all the time because of my work with Black Enterprise. In fact, I was talking to a C-suite executive at one of the major financial companies this morning for one of my other shows. And I've said this before, and you kind of reinforced that. The biggest change in the financial services industry, let's say from the second half of the 20th century to the beginning of the 21st century, is that before it was all transaction focused, which is why if you weren't of a certain market, if you didn't have the tradition of wealth creation in the family, they only wanted to talk to people who already knew, basically. And if you were an outsider, if you were Black, if you were women, and remember, women didn't even have access to their own credit scores into the late 70s. So you weren't even part of the conversation. It was just about the transaction. The financial services industry's growth is only because in order to expand markets, you had to expand relationships. In order to expand relationships, you had to have an educated Black single mother who could credibly present solutions to this market. And so your presence and others like you not only obviously served your clients, but it, in my opinion, saved the financial services industry, because there was no way they were going to be able to tap these markets because they were focused on transaction, when we know relationships is what drives trust, and trust drives decision-making, especially when it comes to money. And so you're just a living, perfect example on every side, both in terms of your own experiences, just a human being, a mother, and someone trying to build their own career in life, but also someone who's advising and directing other people, especially in the entertainment industry, because we know there's a whole history of Black people in all aspects of the entertainment industry making all kinds of money and then finding out, wait, what? And there goes then, I don't trust anybody.
Right.
And so the role that you play is so important. I do want to also give you a chance again to talk about. I said this for a guest for one of our other shows. Most of the people that we have on this show are not traditional faith leaders. They're not. This is not a show where we have pastors and deacons and first ladies. Occasionally we do, but that's most of the time we don't. Most of the time it's people who are doing careers, professions, businesses that they could be perfectly fine and successful at without having anything to do with their faith. You know, they almost run it like a parallel. There's this thing I do that's my work and career and life and how I make a living, and then there's my faith. As we wrap up this segment and go into our next segment, I do want you to talk a little bit more. You've touched on it a couple of times about, you've been very intentional about, no, this is not, I do it for them and I make money. This is, I do it as part of my calling. As I said, in my own career, people that know my career, it's like, I'm clear about who I work for. I work for God. I might be providing the service through this institution or this. So listen, I really want to make that connection because I think that's a big part of what makes you trustworthy, what makes you connect, but also makes you good at what you do in terms of understanding what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. Yes. So I'm gonna stick a pin in it. This is Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. We're here with Michelle Richburg of Richburg Enterprises. Sit tight. We will be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. And we're here with Michelle Richburg of Richburg Enterprises. And guys, you know, she's just talking to you just like, you know, a regular sister, wife, mother, professional. But this sister is her, okay? Billboard's top business managers for 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Featured R&B hip hop power player, multiple years, recognized as a member. You tell me a voting member. Tell me about this voting member of Cat. Listen, you tell me.
The Grammys.
The Grammys. Oh, that's all. That's it. Just the Grammys.
That's all.
Listen, I mean, and you I won't say you're humble, but you are. You know, you should be braggadocious. You need to let me come and brag about you. But
thank you.
Listen,
I just keep my head down and do the work.
Yeah, that's a whole word right there. True, for real. But you know, I do want to have you weigh in a little bit more on how your faith, not only gave you the confidence. Ultimately, though, was a journey to build this business, and now you're 10 years in, but also how it informs how you approach your work. Because again, you could do everything that you've done, successful banking career, successful business, and see that as totally parallel and separate to who you are as a person of faith. But it's been clear during the course of our conversation that you see this as directly connected to your calling and your purpose in God. So just talk about that and how that impacts your approach to your work.
So it's funny that you asked me this or we chat about this now, is that I recently, like 3 weeks ago had my first financial conference one day. It was called Beyond the Bag 2025 Master Your Money Financial and Wellness Summit. And what happened was God gave me a vision. True story. God told me to tell the people. And I was like, tell the people what? This was in the true story. And he just said, tell the people. And then I started getting these downloads. And so that was late August, September and October, I kind of didn't do anything, and the downloads became bigger and bigger. So I didn't even find the venue until November. I put this conference together in less than 3 months, right?
Wow.
And it was so impactful. I mean, it was a lot of work, but we're not here to talk about that. But the end result was God showed up and showed out because I was obedient, right? And I say that to circle back to your point is that this is bigger than me. And it's not about me, right? And so I believe that I can best serve including my clients, but in addition to my clients, outside of urban music, is that I am the best person to help those in their finances who want to do better of what I needed when I was a single mom. Because although I had the education and I was in banking and worked my way up and did all the things, I was still just trying to make it as a single mom. And then I was fired, right? And so now that I'm on the other side and it is my story and it is a testimony, right? It became very clear to me that my story and my expertise will help someone else. Because what I see time and time again is, which is why I called it Beyond the Bag, is that we are just chasing the next thing, the next shiny object, the latest car, who has what on Instagram. So, and I'm also when I did my opening at the conferences, and the people that know me, or if you see me, I mean, listen, I like nice things. I'm not in the closet about that. But what I do now differently and what before is that I plan for those things. I budget for those things. And also, two of my very big things that I hone in is saving for retirement and not having credit card debt, right? Because I'm sitting here now 2 years away from 60, which I'm in a good place, but I had to start all over again, right? And if my advice and my expertise is in retirement is if you start young and you start early, because building wealth is about discipline and it's about sacrifice. And so the next young Black woman or the next young Black man, even inside of music and outside of music, because what happens in the entertainment industry is that they get a lot of money and they want to do all the things. Right. And my talk to them is, I know you want to do all the things. I grew up in hip hop and urban music. I raised my son in. But what I'm saying is, you can't do all the things all the time at the same time.
Yes.
Pick one. And then we got a budget and we got a plan for all the other things, right? So it's a mindset shift and realizing that they are in a situation, speaking in the music industry, that most people will never be in. So you have to take the opportunity now to lay the foundation and to do the right things now to set yourself up for the future, right? And then in terms of folks outside of the music industry, it's just good money habits and the basics, because the old school works, right? And teaching our people about investing, because you can't build long-lasting wealth without investing. So there are core principles that I have done for myself, that we do on a day-to-day basis for our clients, to again be purposeful and be intentional. So it all came from God, and I believe that Richburg, as a business management and financial management firm, is still we are in purpose, but I believe that God put me on this journey to lead me to share the information and my story and my experiences to help those folks who are my assignment, who need to hear it.
Michelle, I mean, that's so powerful. I mean, there's two things that come to mind when you talk about you got to learn investing, and I had to learn. I learned this the hard way. I learned this through experience, because I came from a working poor household and working class family. My mother was very good at saving, but I had to learn that you can't save your way to wealth. You got to invest to get wealth. But the other thing is this idea, and I definitely want you to talk about your book and the other ways that our audience can connect with you before we wrap. In fact, let's do that now. That you're building a legacy that will allow you to plant seeds of knowledge beyond your client base, beyond yourself, beyond your firm, so that you can replicate success. And that's really, I tell you, ministry is replicating God's promises in the lives of others. So
Yes.
talk about that. What's the best way people can get your book? Make sure they see your book.
Oh, so I am co-authored on this book called Chasing 100. My picture's on the back. And basically, as I stated before, it's about not being stagnant and not being comfortable and leaning into the best version of yourself, right? You can purchase the book on our website, which is Richburg Enterprises LLC.com. I'm on socials, Instagram at the Michelle Richburg. I'm on LinkedIn, Michelle Amos Richburg. I also will share that, and God's revelation is that I created a course called Beyond the Bag, which I walk you through. Is 6 modules, and I walk you through the blueprint to building wealth and to getting out of debt and the foundational things that you need to have an abundant life. And that also, the information is on the website.
And please just give that website one more time. I'm gonna say just give it one more time. Richburg Enterprises.
It's Richburg Enterprises LLC.com.
And Richburg is spelled
RICHBURG, Enterprises with an S, LLC.com.
Excellent, excellent. Michelle, powerful, powerful contribution to the show. Fascinated by your journey. Just all I can say is thank you and God bless you for being a guest on Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
No doubt. Well, listen, you have a great example of a model, if you will, of what you should be looking for, not only in terms of skills, credentials, experience, but also those other characteristics, those intangibles that inspire trust in the expertise of a financial services professional. Listen, sit tight. We'll do a wrap and we will be right back with Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. Well, we just had another great conversation, another great edition of Be Lifted Up Radio. And it really was inspiring, which we always want the show to be, but also informative in terms of you getting some insights of what you really want to look for in getting financial advice. First, the importance of getting financial advice. Listen, you gotta get past any trust barriers, lean into finding the right person for you. Yes, check their credentials. Yes, get their references. Yes, make sure they are who they say they are, but recognize that you can't really build wealth without professional assistance, professional help. So if you get nothing else out of it, if you're trying to achieve your financial goals, don't feel like you should go it alone. There's a reason why there's financial services professionals around you. And now you're in an age where there are a lot of people who really identify with you in your culture, in your walk in life, including many people who are people of faith. So listen, thank you again, Michelle Richburg, for joining us. This has been another edition of Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. You can listen to this and every episode of the show at the letter B, liftedupradio.com. We're also found on the Mocha Podcast Network.com. That's podcast with an S. We're on social, on Instagram, Facebook, X, and especially you want to catch us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can see every episode of the show. And we're on Sirius XM 141 HUR Voices at 5 p.m. on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. So listen, there's a variety of ways you can get the show. Please not only download this episode, download every episode, subscribe, and you will be lifted up with us. Thank you. This is Alfred Edmond Jr., your host of Be Lifted Up Radio. God bless you. Take care.